Our mission today is to dive into the global conversation that's been, well, catalyzed by director Christopher Nolan and his film Oppenheimer. We've got a powerful stack of sources here, and they all seem to be examining these really unsettling moral parallels between the atomic age and the age of AI.
It's a parallel that feels more relevant by the day, really.
It does, but the real hook, I think, the tension we really want to focus on, is the duality of Nolan himself. I mean, how can a director whose biggest film is a 3-hour, R-rated, half black and white historical drama?
A film that, on paper, should not have been a blockbuster.
Right. How does that film make $1 billion worldwide and, in the process, make its director the central, completely unexpected figure in the AI ethics debate? It's kind of wild.
It is. And it's because he understands this power of unintended consequences. He's challenged the very notion of predictable outcomes. In fact, Nolan himself pointed out that the astonishing global success of Oppenheimer.
A success that just defies all industry logic.
Completely. He said it could not be predicted by AI. And that's such a powerful statement.
That is a fascinating point to open with. He's basically throwing down a gauntlet. He's challenging this idea of AI as some all-knowing predictive entity, especially when it comes to the nuance of human creativity.
Or market sentiment, for that matter. But here's the twist. He isn't some Luddite director who wants to smash the machines. He's actually very pragmatic. He welcomes AI's use as an enhancement tool.
Exactly. He occupies this really complex space. On one hand, he's the moral alarmist, warning about existential risks.
And on the other, he's the technical pragmatist who sees the utility of the tool itself.
So that's the journey we're going to trace today for you. We'll move from what researchers were calling the Oppenheimer moment, that gut punch of existential alarm over autonomous weapons.
And then we'll get into recognizing the Oppenheimer Fallacy, which is why the old model of nuclear regulation just won't work for AI.
And then finally, we'll talk about how we move from fear to, responsible corporate and creative adoption. How do we actually live with this thing?
And the gravity of this comparison, the one to the Manhattan Project, is not hyperbole. Leading AI researchers, I'm talking about the people actually building this future, they are genuinely calling this their Oppenheimer moment.
So they see the parallel themselves.
They do. They acknowledge a profound, almost existential moral responsibility. They get that they are unleashing a force with potential unintended consequences that just dwarf anything they've ever handled before.
It's a stunning historical comparison, and it's forcing them to reckon with the moral weight of their own research while the technology is still, scaling at this insane speed.
What's so fascinating here, and so different from the 1940s, is that the moral reflection isn't happening in hindsight. It's not after the bomb has dropped.
Right. It's happening in real time, right now.
Which opens up this very small, very critical window for preemptive action.
Okay, that feels like the perfect place to start. Let's unpack this crucial parallel. So let's begin with the ethical core of this entire discussion. The parallel of responsibility between developing the atomic bomb and developing advanced AI. It's really all about the weight of what happens after the creation.
It is. The burden on J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man who was the chief architect of the bomb, was just immense. He came to deeply, deeply regret his role in kicking off the atomic arms race.
He struggled with that guilt for the rest of his life, didn't he?
He did. He spent years in these increasingly unsuccessful efforts trying to curb the very proliferation he had enabled. It was a classic case of post-facto regret born from just unimaginable destruction.
And what we're seeing today is that exact same moral burden, but it's compressed. Radically compressed in time.
That's a great way to put it. The sources we have really highlight the story of AI pioneer Geoffrey Hinton.
People call him the godfather of AI.
They do, for this foundational work on neural networks. And he very publicly quit his job at Google. He resigned specifically so he could speak out freely about the existential risks of his own creation.
He's even voiced deep regret over his life's work. It's just a direct echo of Oppenheimer.
It is. And this is the key insight for you, the listener. That compression of time. Oppenheimer's ethical crisis followed the detonation, the horror of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Hinton's remorse, and the public warnings from leaders at OpenAI, at DeepMind, and others. They're coming before advanced general intelligence, or AGI, has fully materialized.
So if Oppenheimer's generation only had a window for, retrospective regret.
We have a critical, fragile window for preemptive action.
We have the historical roadmap of what that guilt looks like, but maybe just a few years, not decades, to act on it.
Precisely. And theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli really reinforces this. He notes that the ethical questions that Oppenheimer's experience raised, they aren't just historical
So
footnotes.
says they're burning questions today.
Exactly. They demand our immediate attention in the context of AI's exponential ascent. The potential for catastrophic consequences is being recognized much, much earlier this time around, which, I mean, theoretically, that gives us a moral head start.
So let's pivot to the gravest risk, the one Nolan and the security experts all point to. This is where the Oppenheimer analogy becomes, frankly, terrifying.
Yeah.
Weaponization.
Yeah. This is Nolan's specific concern. He calls it the terrifying possibility that these AI systems will be integrated into our defensive infrastructure.
And then ultimately be charged with nuclear weapons.
His fear is about the complete loss of human accountability. Nolan emphasizes this over and over. If we integrate AI into these systems, we must hold people responsible for what they do with the tools they have.
Because the alternative is what? Saying the AI did it.
Exactly. If we allow for this moral gray area where we can say, oh, the AI is a separate entity, and it's therefore not accountable for a decision that starts a global war, I mean, he warns, then we're doomed.
Accountability has to be centralized in human hands, period.
It has to be. That concept, the automated launch sequence, that's what shifts AI from just a powerful tool to a full-blown existential weapon.
And the technical experts, they're not dismissing this as sci-fi, they're confirming the alarm.
Oh, not at all. The sources show this growing, deep-seated concern that rapid, unchecked AI development will inevitably lead to the creation and deployment of fully uncontrollable autonomous weapons systems.
So-called killer robots.
Essentially, yes. Professor Brigitte Dress-Blangley, who specializes in these ethical frontiers, warns explicitly about the potential emergence of new, more sophisticated weapons of mass destruction.
Wow.
And she sees the immediate deployment into the defense sector as the primary pathway. It's the most direct link between a developer's ethical failure in a lab and the highest possible existential risk for all of us.
So if the corporate safety protocols are insufficient, their military deployment scales the catastrophe instantly.
Instantly. But the risk, and this is important, it extends far beyond the battlefield. While that nuclear scenario is obviously the highest magnitude risk, researchers are highlighting this whole host of non-weaponized systemic risks that are, frankly, already eroding our societal structures.
And these are the threats that often get neglected when we're all focused on the big red button.
They do. Let's look at some of the systemic impacts. We can start with the environmental cost.
I don't think most people consider this.
They don't. But training one of these frontier models, like a GPT-4 or something comparable, it requires tens of thousands of GPUs running continuously for months on end. This consumption demands vast amounts of power, drawing energy equivalent to a small city.
And that's before you even build the data centers.
That's right. The construction of these massive data centers carries its own enormous, often hidden environmental footprint. So that technical demand is accelerating the physical expansion of the infrastructure, which ties right back into the ethical concerns about scale and unchecked growth.
Okay, so there's the environmental costs. What about the social risks?
Well, beyond infrastructure, we're seeing pervasive social risks. AI systems that are optimized purely for engagement and retention are, as we know, amplifying extremist ideologies.
Right, the algorithm pushes you further down the rabbit hole.
It does. And then there's the data problem. Biased training data is perpetuating harmful stereotyping and denigration across cultures. And maybe the most tangibly dangerous thing right now is the real potential for wrongful arrests.
Because of flawed AI systems being used in law enforcement?
Exactly. Flawed systems being hastily adopted in judicial or police contexts, like biased facial recognition technology misidentifying suspects. These aren't theoretical problems. They are happening now.
So the message here isn't just about the doomsday button. It's also about this sort of chronic, widespread social erosion that AI can cause if that corporate governance and accountability is absent.
That's it. Nolan's call for human accountability is essential because these non-weaponized risks are fundamentally tied to the corporate deployment and governance, or, the lack thereof of these systems.
This next section provides a phenomenal, just dramatic counterpoint to the idea of allowing AI to take over high-stakes decision-making. We have two incredible case studies from the height of the Cold War.
Real-world example.
Real-world examples where human judgment overrode strict protocols and literally prevented a nuclear catastrophe.
These events are the moral backbone of the argument against autonomous weapons. They demonstrate a kind of human moral agility and skepticism under extreme duress qualities that, algorithms just cannot replicate.
So let's start with case study 1. Vasily Arkhipov, the Soviet submarine officer. The date is October 27, 1962. This is the absolute most tense day of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The world was closer to total war than at any time before or since. I mean, to put it mildly.
And the scene is just chaos deep in the Atlantic.
Complete chaos. Arkhipov was the fleet commodore aboard a Soviet submarine, B-59. The U.S. Navy, and this is key, was unaware that the sub carried nuclear weapons.
And they were dropping depth charges on it.
Non-lethal depth charges, yes. Practice grenades designed to force the submarine to surface for identification. But for the crew inside, an explosion is an explosion.
Right. They're trapped, they've lost all communication with Moscow, and they're running out of power and air.
Imagine the conditions. You're trapped in a metal can, thousands of feet under the surface, being continuously rocked by explosions that signal an attack. You have no idea if World War III has already started on the surface.
It's the stuff of nightmares.
And here's the terrifying hidden detail. The sub carried a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo, a weapon with the destructive power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
So, fearing they were under lethal attack and about to be captured or killed, the captain, he makes a decision.
He does. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, makes the decision to retaliate with a nuclear weapon.
But Soviet protocol almost miraculously served as the ultimate human safety mechanism.
It did. To deploy the nuclear torpedo, it required the unanimous agreement of all 3 senior officers on board: the captain, the political officer, and Arkhipov.
And that's where Arkhipov came in.
That's where he came in. While Captain Savitsky was screaming for the launch, and the political officer agreed with him, Arkhipov refused. He said no.
Just refused.
He chose to wait, to question the data, and to prioritize the catastrophic global consequence over the immediate protocol of retaliation under threat. He insisted they surface first, to confirm whether war had actually broken out.
That one moment, a moment based on skepticism and moral reflection, it saved millions of lives.
It absolutely did. If that torpedo had been launched, even a single tactical nuclear device, it would have almost certainly initiated a full-scale U.S. response and global nuclear devastation.
Arkhipav's decision was so inherently human. It was the ability to apply context, to wait for accurate information.
And to prioritize the wider consequence over your immediate duty in a moment of extreme psychological pressure. An automated system, one that's programmed for immediate self-defense under duress, would likely have initiated that launch.
No question.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move to case study 2. Stanislav Petrov. He's a duty officer in a Soviet early warning center near Moscow in 1983.
Another period of immense superpower tension. Both sides were incredibly sensitive to a first strike.
So on September 26, 1983, alarms suddenly go off in his bunker.
They do. The brand new computer systems start warning Petrov that 5 U.S. ballistic missiles have been launched, aimed directly at the USSR. You can just imagine the flickering lights, the sirens, the chaos in that bunker.
And protocol demanded immediate action.
The protocol demanded that Petrov immediately report the strikes up the chain of command, which would have, in all likelihood, led to a pre-programmed retaliatory nuclear launch.
But Petrov chose to do the unthinkable. He reported a system malfunction, not a missile strike. What gave him the confidence, or, I don't know, the audacity to override this highly advanced, brand new system?
His decision was based entirely on instinct and a kind of higher-order logical assumption that lay completely outside the warning system's program.
He just had a gut feeling.
It was more than a gut feeling, it was logic. He reasoned that a real first strike by the U.S. would involve hundreds of missiles, an overwhelming attack, not just 5. It was an anomaly in the data stream that triggered his human skepticism.
And his skepticism, thankfully, was confirmed.
It was. The alarm was false. The observation satellites had mistaken the reflections of the sun's rays on the top of clouds for a missile launch.
Unbelievable. These 2 men, these unsung heroes, they saved the world through a decision-making process that was inherently human. Skepticism, moral reflection, and prioritizing a greater consequence over a strict adherence to duty.
And this brings us right to the ethical frameworks, because if an AI agent were in those positions, the outcome might have been disastrous, depending on its philosophical programming. This is so crucial for understanding how we might regulate these automated systems.
Okay, let's break that down. Let's start with utilitarianism. This framework, it's often used in modern ethical AI programming, right?
It is. It judges the morality of an action based purely on its consequences, the action that generates the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
So Arkhipov and Petrov were acting as utilitarians.
Deeply utilitarian. They consciously disregarded the immediate protocol, their duty. the law, because they considered the far-reaching consequence of global nuclear war. They acted to ensure the greater good. Their focus was purely on the ultimate outcome, not the rule itself.
But what about the opposite? What about deontology? This theory states that morality is based purely on whether an action adheres to a preset rule or moral duty, regardless of the consequences.
Duty for duty's sake.
Right.
A deontologist AI agent would have strictly adhered to that preset moral law. In Bedrock's scenario, his duty was the immediate reporting of 5 incoming strikes. Full stop.
So the AI would have just followed the rule.
An AI following strict military protocol, which is the highest moral duty in that context, would have reported the strikes, straightforwardly. It is explicitly programmed to follow the rule, not question the larger context of a 5-missile anomaly. And that adherence would have almost certainly led to catastrophe.
And then finally, there's virtue theory. How does that weigh in on autonomous decision-making?
Virtue ethics is different. It focuses not on rules or consequences, but on the character and the consciousness of the actor.
Okay.
So virtue ethicists would argue that an AI should never operate autonomously on the battlefield because it lacks true consciousness. It lacks the capacity for moral reflection, and therefore it cannot act in a truly virtuous manner.
And crucially, it can't be held accountable.
It can't be held ethically accountable, which circles us right back to Christopher Nolan's core warning.
That aligns perfectly with the campaign to stop killer robots, which fundamentally argues that AI agents just lack the character and judgment necessary to make these life-and-death decisions.
And therefore, they should never be placed in crucial positions like those held by Arkhipov and Petrov. The human element, that ability to apply skeptical, high-level moral context to a single data point, that was the world's safeguard.
So the moral urgency is crystal clear. The historical case studies show us the essential role of human judgment, which brings up the natural policy question. If the threat of autonomous AI weapons is this severe, why can't we just regulate AI the way we regulated nuclear weapons with an International Non-Proliferation Treaty and NPT?
And this question is the absolute core of what the sources are calling the Oppenheimer Fallacy.
The Oppenheimer Fallacy.
Yes, and Nolan himself, he explicitly acknowledges how difficult it would be to apply that nuclear-style regulation to AI. The reason is that the atomic model, the NPT, it relies on the control of physical scarcity and industrial scale.
Okay, let's elaborate on that distinction. Why was the atomic bomb, as the sources put it, reassuringly difficult to regulate?
Well, nuclear weapons required this immense, monolithic physical infrastructure. Just think of the Manhattan Project back in the 1940s. It required over $2 billion, which was an astronomical sum for the time.
And thousands of personnel.
Thousands of personnel, and the construction of these massive industrial complexes like the ones at Oak Ridge and Hanford, just to enrich uranium and produce plutonium.
That scale makes it visible.
That industrial scale makes international surveillance and non-proliferation efforts relatively straightforward. You can spot the physical infrastructure, you can trace the supply chain of uranium, you can monitor the facilities with satellites.
But AI is fundamentally different. It's just software.
Exactly, and Nolan's is explicit on this. He says, quote, "I don't believe any of that applies to AI. AI is digital. It's distributed code. It is continuously evolving, easily accessible, and can be downloaded or spun up by anyone with sufficient computing resources."
The barrier to entry that existed for nuclear technology, it vanishes when the technology is software.
Completely. So the Oppenheimer fallacy is the error of treating a monolithic, industrial, single-purpose physical weapon like you would a pervasive dual-use and fluid digital technology.
And that dual-use aspect is really key, isn't it?
It's the key technical distinction. AI is seamlessly dual-use. Unlike nuclear fission, where a power reactor is fundamentally distinct in its function and design from a weapon, the very same AI model can be used to research deadly pathogens one day and then synthesize new antibiotics the next.
We see this with the open source models, like Meta's Llama.
Llama is the perfect example. Let's detail that digital proliferation mechanism. Llama models, even though they were released under specific licensing terms, they quickly became available all over the internet.
So any actor, whether it's a rogue state or a non-state group, can just download the underlying model.
They can, and since the knowledge is packaged digitally, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can then take that base model and fine-tune it with their own specialized proprietary data set for destructive purposes.
So they could create sophisticated disinformation engines or tools for cyber warfare.
Potentially, yes. And There's no physical infrastructure to inspect. There's no uranium to weigh. The proliferation happens at the speed of light.
The lack of those physical control mechanisms means the traditional NPT model, which relies on surveillance and physical constraints, it's entirely ineffective for AI.
It is. And this impossibility of control leads us directly to the next big concept, the velocity gap, which is the core economic and institutional source of anxiety driving this entire governance crisis.
The velocity gap.
It means we have two technological clocks running at wildly different speeds.
Okay, clock one, innovation. This one is spinning faster than anything humanity has ever seen before.
And the sources show the speed is accelerating. The frontier of hardware, we're talking advanced chips, and the AI models themselves, it shifts every 6 to 12 months.
Which compresses the payback window for any investment dramatically.
Dramatically. The hyperscalers like Google and Amazon and chip designers like NVIDIA, they're investing hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Global spending on the necessary AI infrastructure, data centers, chips, power systems, it's expected to exceed $5 trillion by 2030.
That's an enormous financial and physical infrastructure bet.
It's staggering. Now, contrast that with clock 2, absorption. This clock is spinning very, very slowly.
And this is where society and business try to catch up.
Yes. Enterprise and society are struggling with what economists call the elongated J-curve. The J-curve describes that initial investment phase where your costs rise. That's the bottom of the day before you eventually realize any value, which is the upward spike.
And with AI, that bottom part of the J is just stretching out.
It's stretching out. These massive initial investments in AI are yielding only modest returns so far because organizations are struggling with systemic inertia.
So why does that systemic inertia slow down the returns? What's the friction?
It's a few things. First, just achieving data hygiene across all the legacy systems in a large company is extremely difficult and costly. AI models are basically useless if the input data is messy or it's stuck in different silos.
Garbage in, garbage out.
The oldest rule in computing. Second, you have the cost of retraining your legacy staff and completely reorganizing your internal workflows. The technology adoption might be fast, but the organizational redesign is inherently slow. The systemic business reinvention needed to realize that $5 trillion investment is, well, it's a long way off.
So this slow absorption, it kind of mirrors historical periods of overcapacity.
Precisely. Think back to the fiber optic cable build-out in the late 1990s. Massive capital was poured into network equipment, assuming internet usage would just instantly skyrocket.
And it grew, but not nearly as fast as the investment.
Right. It grew, but much slower than expected, which led to a financial bubble burst and a lot of company failures because the market just couldn't absorb the capacity quickly enough. We saw similar pains with early mainframe computing and even electrification.
But the difference now, as you pointed out, is the velocity of the technology itself. The pace of progress in those earlier periods was much slower than the 6 to 12-month shift we see with AI models.
Exactly. Innovation obsolescence is a much greater risk today. So the inescapable conclusion here is that time, not capital, is the binding constraint on AI success. AI has to yield value quickly to justify that massive infrastructure investment, but the organizational slowness prevents that rapid value extraction.
And this speed disparity, the velocity gap, it creates a crisis of comprehension and governance.
It does. Regulation is slow, it's centralized, it's consensus-driven. Technology is fast, distributed, and competitive. Regulation is almost guaranteed to lag significantly behind the technology it's attempting to control.
So what does that mean in practice? That traditional centralized top-down regulation is at high risk of being outdated before it's even fully enacted?
It does, which means the policy focus has to shift. It has to shift away from trying to control the resulting code, which is incredibly hard to control, to the centralized inputs that AI absolutely requires.
Which are what?
Massive training data and vast computational power. The chips and the data centers.
But focusing regulation on chips and data centers seems almost as hard, given the geopolitical nature of hardware manufacturing. Isn't that just regulating the technology at a different, but still really complex choke point?
It is incredibly complex, but it might be the only feasible choke point we have. Unlike code, chips are physical, they're traceable, and they're expensive. They require these incredibly specialized industrial fabrication plants, or fabs.
And data centers need land and power.
And massive power permits and land use. Regulating the intent of usage and the scale of the inputs is perhaps the only path to accountability, rather than trying to ban the resulting code once it's already proliferated globally.
That brings us to the crucial pivot in this discussion. Given the velocity gap and the impossibility of a simple nuclear-style ban, the focus has to shift entirely to how we implement AI responsibly.
Right. And this is a transition where Christopher Nolan moves from the alarmist warning of the moment to the pragmatic director who recognizes the utility of the tool.
His nuance here is so essential for anyone trying to navigate this landscape.
It really is. He supports using technology for what it's best for, as an enhancement tool that facilitates better human work, rather than replacing it entirely. It's about leveraging the tool without sacrificing the underlying human value.
He gave a very specific technical example of this from his own filmmaking.
Yes, he did. He talked about using CGI computer-generated imagery, not to create some new fantastical world, but to paint out the wires on hazardous stunts.
So it doesn't replace the human stunt performer?
Not at all. It makes the action safer and the final image cleaner. The core performance remains physically grounded in reality, created by human action and human risk. The AI is just a powerful utility used to achieve a safer, cleaner result. It's not the creative engine itself.
And this stance, it really defends human originality, which Nolan sees as the most powerful, unquantifiable force in any creative field. He noted that the audience desires something new, to see something they did not know they wanted.
And that kind of breakthrough originality is completely antithetical to systems trained only on existing data sets. They can only remix what's already there.
We've actually seen the industry respond by enacting very targeted sectoral regulation, which proves that a complete international ban isn't necessary to set some boundaries.
Absolutely. The success of the Writers Guild of America, the WGA strike, is a perfect example of controlling the application of the technology.
That new WGA deal was a huge victory for creative accountability. It directly addressed the source of the work. It established that AI-generated material is explicitly not considered source material under their agreement.
Which is critical. It allows writers to retain their usual rights even when AI tools are used for assistance. And most importantly, it prevents studios from coercing writers into using the technology.
It preserves human agency over the creative process.
That's it. This is the model for localized success in the face of the Oppenheimer fallacy. If you can't control the technology globally, you control its application and the terms of accountability within a specific industry. You mandate human agency and ensure that chain of responsibility is never broken.
So, with that in mind, let's look at how businesses are dealing with the practical reality of the velocity gap. They can't just wait for global regulation. They have to adopt AI strategically now.
Right, and the sources mention the emergence of these AI builders to facilitate this.
Who are the AI builders and what problem are they trying to solve?
There are specialized new companies that are basically industrializing the last mile of enterprise adoption. They act as intermediaries, whose function is to convert that generic AI infrastructure, the chips and the data centers, into specific valuable business outcomes.
I'm trying to bridge the gap.
They are. They accelerate the safe, systemic absorption of AI into corporate structures by shielding the enterprises from all the underlying complexity and the constant churn of new models and hardware.
So they're essentially trying to accelerate that slow clock, the organizational absorption, to help it catch up with the fast clock of innovation.
Exactly. They de-risk and industrialize that last mile so that the massive infrastructure investment can translate into durable, measurable value more quickly. They're trying to pull the organization out of that elongated J-curve faster.
To help understand organizational preparedness, we can use this framework of 4 distinct stages of AI adoption. It gives us a kind of roadmap for bridging this gap. Let's start with the first one, which is the highest risk stage.
That would be stage 1, crawl or ad hoc. This is where most organizations currently find themselves. The adoption is all bottom up.
So individual employees experimenting.
Right. Individual employees are experimenting with tools like ChatGPT or Copilot to boost their own productivity, bringing them into the workflow without any centralized oversight. It's a lot like we saw with the first PDAs or instant messaging.
And the risk here is highest because there's no formal strategy, no centralized governance, and a high potential for proprietary data leakage.
Correct. Which leads to the second stage, stage 2, walk or pilots. Here, organizations move past that simple experimentation. They identify specific, structured areas where AI can make a difference and they implement structured solutions.
So this would be for repetitive tasks with clear patterns.
Usually, yes, creating structured pilot programs for, say, analyzing large sets of customer reviews to find sentiment trends, or automating basic project plan generation. It's a structured deployment for tasks with known variables, and it begins the process of controlled value extraction.
Okay, that makes sense. Then we move to run.
Stage 3, run or strategic. At this level, adoption is systematic and it's governed. AI is implemented with clear return on investment ROI goals. They can actually point to specific efficiency gains or cost reductions.
And the use cases would be broader.
Much broader. They span multiple departments, like integrated marketing automation or advanced supply chain optimization, and senior leaders are overseeing the adoption through a comprehensive, organization-wide AI strategy.
And then finally, the most advanced level of integration.
That is stage 4. Fly, or integrated. At this level, AI is fully integrated into the core operations of the business. It drives documented ROI, and it's treated as a foundational business strategy, not just a tool, but a source of real competitive advantage.
And the sources note that very few companies are actually here yet.
Only a handful.
Yeah.
Primarily the hyperscalers themselves, like Microsoft or Google, are truly at this level, where AI is foundational to their entire business model and their culture.
A critical component of moving safely from that crawl stage to the run stage has to be security, especially with all the sensitive data companies handle.
Security is absolutely non-negotiable. The sources stress this. Organizations must start with non-sensitive tasks, like generating meeting templates or synthesizing public reports. But it is vital to set ironclad, clear rules for all employees.
Like what?
Explicitly prohibit inputting client names, financial data, proprietary internal strategy documents, or any unreleased source code into general-purpose AI tools.
And we have a perfect and pretty damaging cautionary tale from early 2023 that illustrates exactly why this is non-negotiable.
Oh yeah, the incident involving the Samsung engineers. They accidentally leaked proprietary internal source code by inputting it directly into ChatGPT. They thought they were using a private, secure tool for debugging.
And it wasn't.
It was not. And that mistake resulted in the immediate exposure of valuable, sensitive company assets to an external LLM. It's a powerful lesson for all organizations. Clear, mandated protocols for using AI tools are the difference between strategic adoption and accidental proprietary data leakage.
So finally, for you, the individual user working within any of these stages, let's tackle the practical application. How do you deal with the garbage in, garbage out challenge? How do you ensure you get the best, most accountable outputs from generative AI?
You have to professionalize your prompting. I like to think of prompts like recipes. They require specific structured ingredients to ensure you get quality outputs and you reduce the risk of hallucination or inaccuracy.
So a truly effective prompt needs, what, 4 key components?
That's right, 4 key ingredients. Let me walk you through them.
Please.
First, you need to define your role and constraints. For example, act as an investor relations analyst writing a Q3 summary. This sets the tone. It sets the expertise level. Second, state your objective explicitly. What do you want to achieve? I need a 5-point summary of the key growth drivers from the last 3 earnings reports. Be specific.
Okay, that's clear. And what about the third and fourth points? These seem like the ones that often separate a useful result from a poor one.
They do. Third, provide examples of good and bad output. If you have a successful summary from the past, include it as context. If you know what formatting errors to avoid, you should specify them. You are basically training the model on your own preferences, right then and there.
I see. And the last one?
And fourth, specify the desired output format, whether that is HTML or a JSON array or a bulleted list, maximum 300 words. That specificity is the difference between utility and garbage, and it mandates that you, the human, are controlling the shape and the intent of the final output.
So the key takeaway from this entire practical section is that the organizations and the individuals who succeed will be the ones who find the right balance between innovation and responsibility. They'll push forward while controlling risk through education, awareness, and mandating human accountability over the machine.
That's it in a nutshell.
This has been a really profound deep dive into the duality that Christopher Nolan's work forces us to confront. On one hand, he gives us the moral urgency of the Oppenheimer moment, that fear of losing accountability in a weaponized future.
And on the other, he offers the pragmatic path of the tool, showing how AI can and must be adopted safely as an enhancement in the corporate and creative worlds. It's a fascinating tension.
It really is. And the entire discussion, it connects back to this profound philosophical concept, the perpetual value judgment that is just inseparable from science and technology.
That's a great point. When Oppenheimer ignited the first atomic device at the Trinity test, he was performing the ultimate value judgment.
He was rolling the dice on behalf of the entire planet.
Absolutely. The Manhattan Project scientists, they had calculated the odds that the gadget, the bomb, wouldn't initiate some catastrophic chain reaction that could ignite the Earth's atmosphere. They were weighing a very low probability of error against an absolutely immense magnitude of error.
And the philosopher Richard Rudner argued that this is just what science is.
He did. Rudner argued that the acceptance of any scientific hypothesis requires judging if the evidence is strong enough for the risks to be morally acceptable.
And that idea applies to technology far beyond the bomb, right? This isn't a one-off thing.
Not at all. It's routine moral science. Consider the Chicago pile in 1922, the very first nuclear reactor. If their calculations about reaching criticality had been wrong, a large part of Chicago could have ceased to exist.
Or think about modern drug trials.
A perfect example. Experimenters have to balance risk and benefit to ensure the experiment is morally acceptable before they offer a potential medication to human subjects. Science is constantly making these moral choices based on the available evidence.
But the crucial difference in the AI age is that the consequences of an error are not confined to a controlled test site in the desert or a limited drug trial. They are global, immediate, and potentially irreversible.
Exactly. And Oppenheimer himself predicted that humanity would sleepwalk into disaster by trying to manage these awful weapons indefinitely. The AI challenge, therefore, is not just one acute single event like the Trinity Test 1 catastrophic launch.
It's a chronic chain reaction.
It is a chronic chain reaction of systemic, enduring, and existential risks. It's much more like climate change, or the perpetual generation-spanning risk of drug surveillance long after a product is approved. It's an ongoing, subtle erosion, not just one big flash.
So since we cannot rely on international control to stop this digital proliferation because of the Oppenheimer fallacy, our survival doesn't depend on some technological halt.
Our survival depends on continuously emphasizing our shared ethical values. It depends on demanding rigorous governance over the inputs, the data, and the compute, and mandating human accountability at every single level of corporate development and application.
We have to shift from trying to control the uncontrollable result.
To controlling the intent and the process of the human actors behind it all.
That's a powerful and I think necessary challenge to leave you with. If the technological singularity is the acute threat, then the systemic loss of human accountability is the chronic danger we face every single day. Thank you for guiding us through this essential deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.